Hey everybody, it's episode 4, the final episode of the You Matter series for UIO, the podcast for teen girls. Hugs to everyone, and thank you for joining UIO, the podcast for teen girls. It is for you and about you inside out. I am Sonja Lewis, your host. Today we're talking about family, particularly what it means to be a part of a blended family, or a step family for that matter. But don't worry, we will clarify what it all means. Anyhow, whether gaining a new sibling, a new parent, or both, it's a huge undertaking considering there will be new routines, new roles, new ways of life. Navigating the change can be challenging at times, but all challenges with effective communications and the willingness to resolve conflict can be overcome. Joining us today to lead the discussion and offer ways to overcome the challenges of living in a blended family is Lisa Doodson. Lisa has authored 2 books, How to Be a Happy Stepmom, Understanding Step Families, and she also founded the company Happy Steps. Happy Steps is the UK's only research-based step family resource center and aims to provide step families with the tools to overcome any challenges they may face in building their new family unit. Welcome, Lisa, and thanks so much for joining us today on UIO.
Oh, thanks, Sonia. It's really nice to be here.
So let's start by clarifying what a blended family is, and is it the same as a step family, for example? Is it okay to interchange the two?
Okay, so bit of history, really. I guess I started out using step family many years ago when I was doing my research, and that was what I was comfortable with. Although people don't like it, it's not a very popular term. It doesn't sound great. So, people think, oh, the wicked stepmom and all of that, the connotation. So people started to introduce blended, and blended, I think, started in the US. It became much more popular in the US. The disadvantage with blended is it implies that you've got to blend your family, you sort of mush them together, find this perfect little sort of family. And it never is really. So it's a little bit tricky to use it. So I've always preferred step family. To me, they're interchangeable. But what I have noticed is that more recently, some people are using blended to include wider people. So perhaps if you've fostered children or adopted children,
Okay.
so it means that no one's left out. So I think for me, it's interchangeable, but I think it could be even wider. So I guess if anyone's listening to this and they have, quite a complicated family, think of it as blended because everyone's connected, but maybe in different ways.
Okay, well, I think that's a great way to define it and to start for us. For the purposes of this podcast, I think we'll go with blended because I think we understand it as best as we can. And on a similar note, just to look at what's going on here in the UK, for example, is there a clear statistic on how many families or blended families or step families, if you will, in the UK? Is this something that's on the rise? I tried to look up some things, do a little bit of homework myself. And in 2011, the stats had dropped by 11%. So I don't know where things are right now. Where are we in 2022? How many school-age children, for example, are living in a blended family?
What you've raised is a really good point, Sonia. And I think it's really important because it looks like the numbers are going down. But we know that's not right. We know it's not. And what you do is you look back and say, well, how do you count blended families, step families? And the reality is when you do the national statistics and you look and you ask who's in what home, you can only count children once. Otherwise, the numbers would be increasing. So if you take a biological family, you've got the kids, they separate, the kids can only be counted once. So even though that couple can go on and both maybe have other partners and the kids can go between the houses and you've effectively got 2 blended families, you would only count one.
I see.
And that's only if the kids are under 18, It does, just because you've got children who are 19, 20, even in their, 20s, 30s, they don't count anymore. And yet the issues they change, but they don't go away. You just sort of have different sort of challenges. So our counting is completely flawed. And the ONS, who's the organisation in the UK that does that, they know that, but they don't really seem to be very open to changing it. So I guess a rule of thumb is that it's generally accepted by people who work in the area, such as myself or other professionals, that it's sort of 1 in 3 families are now blended in some way.
That's good to know. And thank you for explaining how it works, because it did seem a bit sort of strange.
I know. And I think the 1 in 3 is really good. So if people, are listening, and if you're, I don't know, if you're at school or college and you look around and think, I'm not alone, actually, 1 in 3 people here is probably in a similar situation. And I think that's a better way of thinking about it. Statistics are always a bit flawed, but if you just think of it that way, it makes you feel maybe not alone.
It makes absolute sense. I am a part of a blended family. I have an adult stepdaughter. I don't have biological children, but my stepdaughter and her husband have 2 children. And there's lots of planning for activities and consideration for everything. They both have parents. There's all sorts of things to consider. But before the 2 respective parents have decided to make this decision to remarry or become involved with another partner, some children, teenagers might not be comfortable with the idea of their parent even dating again. Is there a normal reaction, and what would you say to our listeners who might be feeling this way? How can they manage the space that they're in? Because it is their parents' decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it sort of depends on the age of the children when it happens. I think the first thing to mention is that people move on at different rates. So if you're listening to this and your parents are splitting up or have split up, and you're thinking, well, I feel lost, I don't agree with it, I don't want it. It's really hard because it's their decision and it is their lives, and there's lots of things happening that you may not know about, that make them unhappy. So they've made a decision, but you're not necessarily in that same space, and it's managing those feelings. I think it's about understanding and being respectful and thinking, well, they clearly weren't happy, but you equally, they need to listen to you and think, I'm not ready. So if your parent is dating again, I think it's about respecting that and thinking, well, that's what they need. But maybe also saying, could we just slow it down a bit? I'm not ready to meet them yet. Or can we just meet them maybe and I don't know, in a short time, rather than, I don't want them coming in and almost living here yet. I'm not ready, And I think it's about time. I think it's respecting and understanding that everyone moves on at different rates. Everyone's grieving for what they've lost. And it might be you've lost friends because parents have moved house and you've had to move schools, or you've moved different areas. And, there's lots of different losses, and it takes time, to really adjust and work out what the new normal is. So for kids, it's about trying to understand that. For younger kids, it's really, really tricky. But I guess for teenagers, try and put yourselves in their position.
That sounds really interesting, because it sounds like it's important to have that relationship where you can communicate with your parent instead of sitting around and sort of stewing about it and being upset and acting out. It's being open and honest, acknowledging things and talking to them. That's really key. Thanks so much for that. What about a situation a little bit with, I think what we've talked about is the actual sort of split up, but sadly, unfortunately, sometimes there's a bereavement. How does a young person deal with that, knowing that the parent is not going to return and the other parent needs to move on because relationships are important at some point? And what would some advice be on how do you manage that space?
It's such an awful lot of grief, for children to cope with, well, for adults, for anyone to cope with. I think the first thing is to talk to your parents and maybe say, can I get some support if you're not coping, if you're feeling really vulnerable and sad and it's not getting any better and you'd like to talk to other people, there are lots of places that you can do that. In the UK, there's Child Bereavement UK, and they're a great organisation, and it's designed to help children. So children will meet children, and it's an outlet, it's a way of talking. And I think that is important. Not everybody needs that help, but if you do, talk to your parent and say, maybe that might be something for me. And if things are moving on and you're okay, you're coping, it's, the grief is sort of getting a little easier, and your mum or dad decide to repartner, try and be open, but make sure that you have space to think about your parent that you've lost. So, maybe it's a special room, in your house, or maybe your bedroom, where you can still keep them alive, whether it's special memories, or it might be photographs, or things that were theirs that are precious to you. So a new person coming in, it's unfair to expect them to live with all of the other things that were part of the parent that's no longer there. It's not fair, and no one moves on, and then you get stuck, and being stuck isn't great. But so it's about a balance. I suppose it's a balance. You've got to find space for your parent that you've lost, and try and talk to your parent that's still there, encourage them to move on, be happy for them, but equally make sure they give you some space, and try and find that and keep talking. That's the best thing I would say, is don't hold it all in. Don't try and be strong for your parent. If you're upset and sad, they'd want to know.
Yes, it's very key, communication. Well, moving forward, assuming that this new family is almost at completion, you're there now, you're getting a new stepmother or stepfather, what should the children going into this space know to either avoid pitfalls or navigate the new space?
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about communication, and what about the parents as well? What should people be doing? We're going into a new family now.
So I think respect is the key, really. And I know some people say, well, you have to earn respect. And I sort of disagree, because if you start off respecting people, they can lose your respect. That's fine. But it's hard to gain your respect if you're not giving them any at the beginning. I suppose go in there, be polite. I've talked to lots of families where the kids just won't speak to the new step-parent. And that's, it's rude. And then the new step-parent doesn't feel they can talk to the children, and it becomes really difficult. So I suppose be polite, as you would with anybody, any adult, anybody that comes into your home, just be polite. They're not replacing anybody. Try to think of it that they're just another person that should be there to look after you, to look out for you. They're not going to be your mum or dad. They're going to be an adult that's got some life experience. I've never met a single, I've talked to a lot of stepmoms because my research was on stepmoms. I didn't meet a single one who wanted to replace the mum or be a bad stepmom. They want to help. But often it's very difficult, because everybody becomes a bit negative to start with, and then that just becomes entrenched. So if you're the teenager maybe in this situation, just try and be as nice as you can, as polite. They're going to do things differently. And if you feel they're being unfair, then talk to your parent. But try not to put your parent in the middle, because what happens often is the biological parent sort of ends up as a sort of a gatekeeper between their children and the new partner, and they're trying to make their children happy and their partner happy, and they get a bit frazzled because everybody seems to be wanting different things. So I suppose think of it like a bit of a triangle or a team. You're all on the same team. They are going to be different. They're going to find it hard. You're going to find it hard. But try and find things that you like doing together. Search out something, if you like going shopping and your dad's been rubbish at going shopping, this person might be great. They might be a little buddy that can take you shopping and maybe treat you occasionally. That sort of thing, find something, could be anything, but think about what you enjoy and try and use it to get to know them.
I think that's really good advice, because it's so important when someone new enters a space. If a child has been with that single parent for a period of time, and then suddenly another person comes in, there's all sorts of roles, if you will, beginning to look at the roles. Okay, so who's going to be doing what now, and talking about those things up front and figuring out what you're good at and what you like and what you can do together, for example, with that new person in your parents' life. I mean, I can relate somewhat. Of course, my stepdaughter she's grown up and everything. But one of the things that I wanted to say about the importance of our relationship, it has been about friendship. And it's been about sort of having our own relationship, because I have a relationship with her father. She has a relationship with her father, and we have a relationship together. We have a relationship as a family, but she and I have a relationship. And I think it's just so key what you said about finding things that we've enjoyed doing together. And that's made a big difference even in an adult situation.
Exactly. And I think that's really important, Sonja, because the other thing that can happen as well is if you've been with a parent on their own for quite a long time, as the child, sometimes you sort of get pulled up to be the adult. And then the other, the new partner comes in and they sort of, it feels like you're being pushed back into being the child. And all I'd say is I know that must feel really difficult because they're taking over your role. But your role is the child. Be the child. Enjoy your childhood. Try not to be, if you're with your dad, you don't have to do all the adult things and, I don't know, buy the food and cook, and let someone else do it. Enjoy being with your friends. They're not taking over your role. It's just that your role changed because of that loss. So it's really common. And I think that can really, as you said, it's about roles. And people think, well, what is my role? So try not to see it negatively. It can be a real positive, and you can get your life back and enjoy being with, not worry about your dad or your mom, and just go and enjoy yourself.
I think that's amazing, because that is something, one of the questions that I was going to ask you is about when you're going into a situation like this, what are some of the positives that can come out of it? And you just shared one, that even though you've got this new person, you can reclaim or regain that space. You're growing up. You're a kid. You're a teenage girl, and it'd be lovely. It's a precious time to be able to be in that space and be with your friends and do some of the things and enjoy the space that you're in.
Exactly, and not worry. I think it's like not having to worry about the parent. And I guess another real advantage is that you get to see different parenting styles. And I think in a biological family, we get to see a mum and a dad, our own mum and dad, and you get to see friends, but it's not the same. You're not living with them and their families. So you get to see a different, a style of parenting. But then if your mum or dad move on and repartner, they'll be different. They will have different things. And I think of it as sort of, it's a bit like a pick and mix. You can go, well, I like the way that my dad does that, but actually my stepdad's really cool. He's really good at playing, or he understands me, he lets me talk, and my mum does this and my stepmom. It's about saying, as I'm growing up, what do I want to be as a parent? And I think there's no magic number that says two's the perfect number. You need a mum and a dad and it's fine. You can have all these people and they're on your team. They should be on your team, and most of them are. And it continues with grandparents. I think there are benefits. And I guess the final benefit that I've seen and has been researched is you become more emotionally intelligent. I think it really helps your development in understanding relationships and emotions and all of those things. And that, we all need that as an adult. It's reading people and trying to understand. So you're being exposed to more things, I suppose. And it's good. It's good for us.
That's really important. And sometimes in our blended families, we bring different cultures together. People have different backgrounds. And so that's a really good point that you make. You really are being exposed to so much more. And that's a fantastic advantage. Well, so far, we've really talked about looking specifically at an individual girl, if you will, coming into that situation. Let's talk a little bit about when siblings come along in the situation with the new parent. I mean, there will be plenty of case studies where the siblings within, the blended families are the best of friends and they act compassionately towards one another. But on the other hand, there will be examples where there is just fierce rivalry, jealousy, and a general disdain between the siblings. Let's talk about that. What advice do you have for our listeners on how to build a relationship with their new siblings and how they can get the most out of their new relationships?
Yeah, it's it's a really, really difficult area because you can end up with very, very different age ranges, and that can be good or bad. And then you can also end up with like a real clash with, I don't know, two 14-year-olds from different, being sort of pushed together. And often it's not just the emotional, it's the physical. They might end up having to share a room because houses are only so big. We can't afford to just keep buying bigger houses. So there's a lot of people really struggle with that. And then it's about fairness, treating them all the same. Often after breakups, parents can feel guilty if they're not with the children all the time, so they can spoil them. And if the children on one side, if you like, of the couple see these other children coming in and being spoiled, it can cause resentment. So I suppose from an adult perspective, it's about treating everyone the same. So it's having the same rules, and those rules might be different in the other homes where the children go. Mm-hmm. But, it's about having one rule for all the kids. So when all the kids are there, we know what the rules are. It might be no TV when we're eating. It might be we always eat together. It could be anything. But whatever those rules are, they're the same. And I think if you're the child, come into that, you're the teenager, whatever it is, remind your parents of that it's maybe not quite fair, and can we make it fair? I think it's trying to do it in a grown-up way and not necessarily just kicking off. I know it's really hard, but show your parents how to be an adult, just tell them, well, actually, it's not really fair that I'm supposed to do this. But try and be creative, try and think of solutions. So rather than just moaning and saying, I don't like this, or I don't like sharing a room, think about what would help. And maybe would it help to sort of get, change the furniture around so it sort of divides the room a little bit? Or, do you just need a bit of space to do your homework, and could you use a different room? Or, do you know what I mean? Don't just go with, I don't like it and I'm fed up and I hate it here and everything blows up and your parents go, oh, what are we going to do? Think about what you want to happen and be reasonable. It is what it is. I know it's not perfect, but they're doing the best they can. It's not what I would choose, but hey, we all have to deal with that, as adults, we'd all like different things, I'm sure, at different times. So really, it's, if there are siblings, there's the practicalities we've just talked about, but then get to know them. Try not to be negative and think, I'm not going to like them. They're boys, they're girls, they're whatever, they're too young, too old. There might be something that you actually bond with and think, I really like them, or they're good at maths and they can help me with my homework, or it's someone that I can talk to, because maybe sometimes you have like an only child and then suddenly they've got loads of siblings. Yes. And that can be quite nice because they're not lonely. So I suppose it's about, like we said before, really being positive, thinking about what you could gain rather than not what you've lost.
That's really important. And I know of at least one situation where a family came together, each had 2 children, and they were slightly different ages, but more close to each other's age. Like 2 of the boys were maybe 2 years apart, and then a girl and a boy, maybe again 2 years apart, and the girl was the youngest and everything. And I think it was an example of, I'm sure there were challenges because I wasn't on the inside of it, but they're all grown up now. And you don't have a clue that they are step sisters and brothers because they refer to each other as, oh, happy birthday to my brother, happy birthday to my sister, and so forth and so on. But I imagine there were quite a few challenges along the way in getting there because 2 of the siblings joined the home that 2 were already established in, and there had to be some sort of changes. And I think it's so key what you said about getting to know your new siblings. And it's incumbent upon your parents to be fair, but it's also incumbent upon you to reach out. And so I think this leads to, if you feel that somebody's particularly hostile towards you and you think you have been trying to reach out, is there anything more that you can do when you really feel that I'm really reaching out to Stella here? She doesn't like me. She doesn't want to be seen with me at school. How do you navigate that space?
I suppose it's trying to understand why, isn't it? And I would talk to your parents, talk to the two adults, and and try and be open with them and say, can you help me? And there are different ways of parents can act as mediators. And it might just be, there might be something that's happened that you weren't aware of, why Stella doesn't like you anymore. Or,
yes.
It can just have been, she might be embarrassed. It might be, who knows what's going on. But actually, if you can get someone to help, and it doesn't have to be an outsider, it can be your family members, or it could be an aunt or someone you trust, and maybe they could talk to you and say, look, we don't have to be best friends, but could we just get by? It's talking. Again, it's not bottling it up. It's not trying to make things worse. If everybody sort of has this big standoff and they don't like each other and it's really obvious and they stomp around and, and the parents go, and you get blamed and you haven't done anything, and then it makes everything just builds up and up and up and blows up. So try and diffuse it. Think, okay, I don't think I've done anything wrong. They're just being really mean. Talk to your parents and just see what you can do. There's usually something, and it might be a really small thing, and suddenly things are a little bit better. You don't have to be best friends. Maybe you'll never be best friends. That's fine. But we go back to that first thing, which is be respectful. And if you can't get on, just be respectful.
A couple of things come up for me as we're talking about this, and one of them is linked to emotional and mental well-being. Let's talk a little bit about the role of being emotionally and mentally healthy that it plays in coping. And if you are in an unhealthy space, again, what can parents perhaps do, or what can be done to help mitigate that situation?
So I think it's trying to understand, are you just, if we're talking about, I don't know, maybe depression or sadness, if you're feeling sad and down and your emotions are quite dulled, is it trying to understand why? Is it just a temporary thing because you've had a sad thing happen? Or is it you just can't break out of it and you just feel really low the whole time? So there's we're supposed to be happy sometimes and sad sometimes. That's life.
Yes.
So I think it's not jumping straight on it and going, I'm just depressed. It's saying, okay, I'm really sad at the moment because, I don't know, we've moved house and I'm not as close to my friends and I'm feeling really sad. It's okay to be sad. It's normal to be sad, and even say to your mum or dad, I'm feeling a bit sad, and that's okay. They need to know, you would want, as a mum, I'd want to know. So think about that. If it's not going away, and it's affecting everything. It's affecting your friendships, it's affecting your school life, your hobbies, your interests, you've got no interest, then that's more serious. And I think then it's about really talking to somebody. And if you can't talk to your mum or dad, talk to somebody maybe at school or college, and it will be completely confidential. But it's really important to just say, I think I need a bit of talking therapy. I need someone to talk to me. So understanding the difference and just making sure that you're doing healthy things. So making sure that you go out with friends or do things outdoors, particularly when the weather's nice. Go out and go for a walk and take the dog and throw a ball for the dog. Or, do you know what I mean? Go and do something that gets some fresh air, and you might get a different perspective. So keep yourself, if you are feeling okay, keep yourself like that. Emotional and sort of well-being. We need sort of three different sorts of people, really. We need our family, and we need our friends. And if we're an adult, we need a partner. As kids, we need all of those things. We need family to surround us and friends to surround us, particularly teenagers. You need your friends really, really is so important. Kids can be tricky, they can fall out and not be your friend another day, and that's it's horrible, really horrible. We've all been there. It doesn't have to be like that, and don't take on all that responsibility, but just please talk to somebody and make sure you've got your support network. And it might be you can talk to a step parent, not your own parent, because you feel they would understand that. Try it.
I think that's so key. And the point that you made about we are going to be sad sometimes. UIO did some research a couple of years ago, and one of the things that we found out from teenage girls, a lot of the pressure was this expectation of being happy all the time. And it was making them crazy. And so this is such an important point that you've had this big change in your life and you've had to move, you've done whatever, you are going to be sad, but finding that balance and knowing when it doesn't go away and how to cope with it, I think that's so key. Before we get out of here and get some last points from you, there is something that I want to bring up, and that's social media. Because young people have never known anything other than social media. And we've talked a lot in different podcasts about how to conduct yourself on social media and so forth and so on. But when you find yourself in a new situation or in a blended family, for example, are there any sort of do's and don'ts or anything in particular that you need to be more concerned about?
Yeah, social media is just, it affects every part of our life now, doesn't it? It seems you can't get away from it. And I think there are different sorts of people. There are those that embrace it and want to use it. It just becomes part of their personality and identity, and others that don't. And I suppose it's understanding if in your new family, how does everyone feel about it? So if you're sharing things and it makes other people uncomfortable, then don't do it because it's not fair. You know, they have perhaps a different view of social media. Some people are really anti-sharing family times and family spaces, particularly, for example, I think what I see it quite a lot where one example I'm thinking of, this new family effectively went on holiday and the teenagers were sort of sharing pictures and videos of, the house that they were living in, the villa or whatever it was. It was all very nice.
Yes.
And then biological mum was seeing all of that and sort of going, oh, well, we couldn't afford to do that. And suddenly you've created this issue that didn't need to be there because you're sharing all this information with people that aren't there, and you're either going to make them jealous or angry, or potentially, I'm not saying you will, but I suppose it's being aware of that and just talking to the people you're with and saying, is it okay if I just share this? This is a nice moment. I want a picture of us. Do you mind? Rather than just doing it and posting it. So it's about awareness.
That's so key. It is so key. Nothing makes me more concerned than when I've found something out or seen something on the internet that I was involved in and I didn't know it was going to be on there. And it's like, what does this mean? Having written for a big part of my career, if people think it's their story, they get a little tricky about it. So I do think it's so key. I think your advice is great, making people aware and sometimes even getting permission to share things.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's really key. So it's been an absolutely wonderful conversation, but I don't want to get out of here without finding out if you have any more hot tips for our young people living in a blended family, or if there's anything that we haven't talked about that you really want to make our listening audience aware of.
So I think, Sonja, one of the things I always talk about, and I think it's just really important, some people don't realise it takes a long time to blend your family, to integrate, for everyone to feel comfortable. And by a long time, I'm talking years. It's sort of 4 to 7 years. So if you're, I don't know, you're 14 years old, maybe when your parent finds another partner, that's a lot of years. That's a lot of percentage of your life. And so that's tough. But I think it's not like you go from nothing to 100% in 4 years. Things are getting improving all the time. And you can make it quicker by doing all the things we've talked about, by reaching out and being positive about things. And so that can really help. But if it's taking, it does take a long time. So I guess it's about breathing and sort of saying it's okay. Everyone's trying to find their place in this new home, and it takes a while. So your place might have shifted a bit. You might have been an only child, and now you've got siblings, and that's quite tricky, and there might be good things and not so good things, and you've got to get used to that. So think about it that everyone's got to understand each other. You've all got to learn a bit more about, so it's going to take effort. So don't rush it. Don't immediately throw your hands up and go, this is awful, I hate it. Give it time. So it's all about time. That's really important. I think it's about understanding your role. If you're the teenager or if you're the mum or the dad, it's the same sort of thing. What's your role now? And if you're the teenager here going, oh, I don't want a new mum, I don't want a new dad, you're not getting a new mum or dad. You're getting someone else in your life that you've got to get to know. And so work out what you want to call them. And that should be your choice. I've never really known anybody impose that on anybody. But think about what you want to call this person. Ultimately, they are going to have new rules, but make sure you understand those rules and maybe why. If they come up with a weird rule that you've never had, or you feel like you're being sort of told you've got to do something different, try and understand it. So I suppose it's about asking and being inquiring, not being negative, just going, okay, why is that important? And then once you understand it, that's fine. Or, okay, we'll give that a go. So being open, making new memories. I think that's the final thing maybe to sort of leave it on is about you've got to make new memories together, because you've got all the ones in the past. They're not going to go away. You're not going to forget your mum, forget your dad, or if they're still around, you'll make new memories with them in different ways. But it's about, integrating this new little unit and having new memories, new traditions. It might be that you always have Friday night is the night when you're all together. Make it a movie night or make it a games night or whatever it is. Have a little tradition that's yours. And if you're the teenager, ask if you can do that. If you've got an idea, throw it in the ring and say, how about we make Thursday nights pizza nights and see how that works. So ultimately be positive. It's change. We all get a bit sort of wobbly with change, but it can be really positive. So try and be open to new experiences.
That's really great advice. And it's such a great note to end the podcast on, because it can be quite intimidating going into a new situation, just not knowing what's going to happen. But there's so many positives, so many things to look at, and so much great advice about how you overcome the challenges that you're likely to face, going into a new situation. It's been absolutely amazing, Lisa. Thank you so much for joining us today. And it's been really quite uplifting, if you will. Some great information. If people are feeling really challenged about their new situation, you've given so much great advice on how to move forward. And thank you so much again for being our guest.
Oh, you're very welcome, Sonja. It's been lovely talking to you.
That is a wrap for UIO, Your Family Matters, with some great information from Lisa Doodson. And it also wraps up our series, and it's our final podcast, at least for a while. Thank you, girls, for listening, and thank you, God, for the opportunity to do the show. I pray for blended families the world over that they will take all the necessary measures to thrive as a family unit and provide safe, happy spaces for the children involved. Also, I pray that our teenagers will get the necessary emotional and mental support they need to thrive in their new situation. I ask these blessings in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Well, this is UIO signing off officially. After 4 years of some great podcasting with so many wonderful women the world over. Check out our library of podcasts anytime on Apple Podcasts and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Meanwhile, you can still hit me up on Twitter at Sonja Lewis, Instagram at Sonja D. Lewis, and other social media as well, to keep discussions going on topics that matter to you. Remember, you matter. Take care of you inside out, and remember, it is UIO.